Hi, I'm Rachel, and this is my July 2023 page 112 tag. The page 112 tag was brought to BookTube by Sean at Sean the Book Maniac. It is based off of a French literary prize wherein they comprised the long list of said prize by reading solely page 112 of the book's novels in contention. Page 112 is supposed to be past all of the polished pages for editors, and it's also in the middle of the book, and it gives you no context for the rest of the story, so you can only judge based on the writing quality on that one page. So I have been using this tag since the beginning of COVID to slowly cull my physical unread shelves while I also build them back up again, of course. I have this handy dandy Books and Cats mug. It is filled with pieces of paper with the titles of the books I have acquired in 2022 or before. And what I do in each of these videos is I pull out 3 of these titles at random, then read page 112 with you, and then decide on one book that will be joining my month's TBR. Or at least that is the way I usually play the game. Every 4th month, I decide to spice things up a bit, do things a little differently, and I take the 3 runners-up from the last 3 months and I pit them against each other. It's a fun way to reconsider some of the books again and also give me the gift of less post-production, although I am sad not to be, pulling out my pieces of paper. But it is nice also to have less work to do after the camera goes off, and this is my birthday month after all. So, also, my neighbors right now are being a little loud on their balcony, so perhaps this is the perfect time to say, please come back with me into the past. It doesn't help that the handful of Polish refugees he's met on the pier, those lucky enough to still be in contact with family back home, describe what they know of the state of their country in terms Addie can't fathom. Overcrowded ghettos, public beatings, Jews dying of cold, hunger, disease by the thousands. One young woman from Krakow told Addie that her husband, a professor of poetry, had been taken along with dozens of the city's intellectuals to the wall of the city's Wawel Castle, where they were lined up and shot. Afterward, she said, with tears streaking her cheeks, their bodies were rolled down the hill and into the Vistula River. Addie had hugged her as she cried into his shoulder, and then tried with all of his might to erase the image from his mind. It was too much for him to bear. As he inches toward the ship, Addie takes inventory of the languages being spoken around him: French, Spanish, German, Polish, Dutch, Czech. Many of his fellow passengers carry small valises like his own. In them, the handful of belongings with which they hope to start their new lives. Tucked into Addie's are a roll-necked sweater, a collared shirt, an undershirt, a spare pair of socks, a fine-toothed comb, a small sliver of army-issued soap, some twine, a razor, a toothbrush, a date book, 3 leather pocket notebooks already full, his favorite 78 RPM record of Chopin's Polonaise, Opus 40, No. 1, and a photograph of his parents. In his shirt pocket he carries a half-used notebook. In his trouser pocket, a few coins and his mother's linen handkerchief. He has 1,500 zloty and 2,000 francs, his life savings, stashed in his snakeskin wallet, along with the 16 documents he's collected in order to talk his way out of the army and into a Brazilian visa. Addie's encounter with Ambassador Sousa Dantas in Vichy has been brief. "Leave your passport with my secretary," Sousa Dantas told him when they were far enough from the hotel that no one would overhear. "Tell her I sent you and come back for it tomorrow. Your visa will await you in Marseille. It will be good for 90 days. There's a ship leaving for Rio around the 20th of January. The Alcina, I believe. I don't know when or if there will be another. You should get on it. You will need to renew the visa once you arrive in Brazil." "Of course," Addie said, thanking the ambassador profusely and reaching for his wallet. "What do I owe you?" But Sousa Dantas just shook his head, and Addie realized that it wasn't for the money that the ambassador was risking his job and his reputation. All right, so this one is very compelling. There is a lot going on in it. It's, a novel about refugees and genocide and the effects of war. And this character is obviously trying to escape from what is World War II into Brazil. And it's just jam-packed with detail. I mean, we start just with trying to get a vague understanding of what's happening in Poland, and the author brings in like a direct sort of personal account from like a bit character who interacts with her protagonist. That's what I assume are these characters. And then we go into Addie's more particular story and his desire to escape to Brazil. And there's all that, sensory detail of all the specific things he's packed, which basically comprises of what his life is, like, or what his life will be, like what he could take with him. And it's like very, very small amount of things. And then we end, I think, in a way, on a surprisingly hopeful note. I mean, when I first heard the line about the ambassador saying, "Leave your visa," I thought, oh no, is this a scam? I guess I'm not feeling all that, hopeful. This isn't much of a page to feel, optimistic about the human race, but at the end of it, there is that sliver of hope that there is someone who's risking everything just, to help people out of, the goodness of his heart. So yeah, I mean, it's very compelling stuff. I feel like that Georgia Hunter moves through a variety of topics really pretty easily and can keep people's interest. I mean, I think part of it is the subject matter, the high stakes of somebody escaping, war and genocide is always, just, gives you an immediate sense of connection to, the importance or the emotional realities of that, that it's, you don't have to, convince the reader that, the stakes are pretty dire. And of course, I'm also, in the thick of it, remembering the Auschwitz book I read for the BookTube Prize last round. And in a way, that's almost working against this. I'm, part of me wants to continue to read about this stuff, and part of me is just, overwhelmed and kind of want a little bit of a break. And especially this novel, because I know, from the back and everything that it's going to be sprawling. It's going to cover several family members, so it's going to just have a lot of variety of trauma and of other things going on in it, and it's not necessarily a short novel either. So that's a little overwhelming, especially since, once again, I am judging for the BookTube Prize and have other, obligations in my reading. So I'm of two minds of this book. Part of me definitely thinks it's worth a read, and part of me thinks not now. The previous muchacha had started working in a kitchen when she was 8 years old, after her father died. As a girl, she had been able to buy shoes for all her sisters, and this had been a source of great pride. Anna heard her tell Gloria this story before the woman left her post to marry. "I want to work too," Anna had said to Doña Nancy some years back. Nancy had said no, but agreed to give Anna an allowance for helping her mother. Plus, Anna wasn't going to school. Gloria taught her with books Nancy brought home from the middle school where she taught English. So Anna was working, but she wasn't. It was all very confusing. She spent all her time around adults. And then there's a break. Nancy liked everything really, really hot. She liked a quesadilla that could set off a smoke alarm when you unfolded the tortilla. She liked her soup still bubbling in the bowl. If you served Nancy food and it wasn't scorching hot, Nancy would frown and then she'd get up and microwave her plate. So Anna charred everything, skirted burning every meal. She often scorched her fingers taking plates to the dinner table. You learned these kinds of things about people, their habits, their eccentricities, when you worked for them. Anna knew Nancy better than Nancy's own husband, who sometimes sought Anna's advice over a birthday gift or anniversary plan, which her mother thought was an outrageous thing to ask a child. Sometimes he'd even ask Anna about Nancy's schedule. For instance, Roberto probably didn't notice that Nancy never wiped her feet on the bath mat when she got out of the shower, instead leaving a trail of watery footprints that required listening for the turn of the faucet, then opening the bathroom door so Anna could be ready with the mop. Roberto probably didn't know that Nancy smoked cigarettes sometimes when he was at work, and then hid them in the curtain of the upper right drawer of their shared wardrobe, between the neat rows of panties Anna folded each week. Okay, so admittedly I was a little confused. I've read this a couple of times to try to understand what's going on, because there's a lot of name dumps and not a lot of associations about who's who to one another. But, well, my understanding from this page now is we are in a domestic situation where Doña Nancy and Roberto are, you know, the heads of the house, and they have a bunch of servants, I would assume, working for them. The first one we're introduced to is a young girl who started working very early in her life, it seems. She was called a muchacho. And she inspired Anna to start working young as well. And for whatever reason, even though apparently they had young help before, I guess, Nancy wasn't so keen on it. Except it seems like Anna, in fact, is doing a lot of work under the table, as it were, for this couple. And that her mother seems to also be a servant in the household. And that Anna herself isn't going to school and is being taught by, I assume, another servant, Gloria, maybe. And so, yeah, that's the relationships, as I can tell, between all of these people. And then it seems like Nancy, in a way, has the most characterization. Like, we learn how she likes her food. We learn all of the secrets that Anna knows about her that her husband doesn't, which makes me think that this woman is actually very involved with this little girl, you know, mostly, I guess, in a serving capacity. I'm not sure. So I felt like those details were kind of interesting, but the actual page was a little difficult to follow because of the relationship stuff, and that it's all, you know, narrative and... So, I mean, I found it intriguing. I'm definitely interested, but I do think I'm going to put this one down for now. We, Chef, Mick, jubilant, watched him walk away, then turned back to the duck l'orange he was working on for tomorrow's home cooking night in the restaurant, to be offered along with the beef bourguignon and paella. A dish Mick loathed both to eat and to cook, because it was complicated and labor-intensive, and in the end a waste of good seafood, because the rice just took over. But luckily the guys on the fish station were in charge of it. "What the fuck did he want?" Consuelo asked when Chef was out of earshot. The question was rhetorical. She had heard every word. "More lobster thermidor," said Mick. "Get ready to outdo the last one." "We're meat, not seafood," she said, tipping a tray of roasted bones into a hotel pan in a hollow clattering rush. "Not for the captain's table dinner. He also wants filet mignon with red wine reduction." She grunted. "Easiest thing in the world." "Then it's yours," he said. She cocked her hip against the counter edge and folded her arms and fixed Mick with a sideways hooded glare. "So you're his butt boy," she muttered. "What?" said Nick. "Nothing," she said. "Congratulations." "No," he said, advancing toward her, making her back up to get away from him. He stopped when they hit the end of the station. His face was right in hers. "You do not talk to me like that on my station." He held his face close to hers, so close their breath commingled in the short air between them. His eyes pinned hers. She stared back at him. Her irises were the color of cinnamon, reddish-brown, flecked with the pale gold of ginger. He could smell that scent she wore, very slightly rising in fumes from her warm neck, emanating from the thrum of her elevated pulse. It had no effect on him here. He felt clear, unconflicted. He was management. So be it. That was how you moved up in the world. You took opportunities when they came, and you acted with authority when you had to. "Do you understand me?" he said, his voice even. "I want an answer." So yeah, I really like this. I think maybe part of the reason is I'm a manager myself, so it was really interesting to look at that scene through that lens. I don't know much about cooking at all. Certainly struggled through some of those words, and I certainly don't know much about being on a cruise ship, but I mean, I feel like in a way management is, there's a similarity to it no matter where you are, and we have this character, this Mick, and, you know, he seems complicated, I think, you know, he has a legitimate complaint. You know, what Consuelo said is, like, very unprofessional. But at the same time, he seems like a bit of a dick manager. Like, you know, when she complains about doing something that isn't technically her job, and he says, well, then it's yours. Like, you know, how dare you complain? I mean, to a certain extent, sure, your job is that sometimes you have to suck it up and do something you don't want to do for the good of the company, so that, you know, they'll think fondly of you later. It ultimately comes back to your self-interest too, to look good in a job, unless of course the job really is a horrible job and you should get out of it. And maybe that is that for this for Consuelo. Yeah, I mean, it's just really interesting, professional relationship at play. And, at parts I feel like Mick has a point and he shouldn't be spoken to that way, and he has to do, delicate work and, do his job. But at the same time, he probably could have handled it better. He probably could have been more sympathetic to the fact that this was pushed on her. And, cultivated a better, work environment between him and his peers. But instead, he does seem like he is focused more on himself and getting ahead. So that's, this is a fascinating, interaction and relationship. And, it's work related too. It's one of those things I'm not sure we always get enough in literary fiction, I think, the work relationship, and probably here it's aided in part by it's such a unique or interesting work environment. But I don't know even how much these two characters feature in the rest of the story, but yeah, it really grabbed me as a manager myself. I do not want to be like Mick. I'm not sure I need to make a welcome back to the present moment because my AC has also just kicked on. I can't remember if it featured in any of my other clips, so it is what it is. But anyway, to recap the 3 books you just heard about, my April pick was We Were the Lucky Ones by Georgia Hunter. My May pick was Of Women in Salt by Gabriela Garcia. And my June pick was The Last Cruise by Kate Christensen. I think the first thing I'm going to do is justify striking this one from the list, using pretty much the same excuse that I used in the clip from a few months ago, which is, Holocaust fiction. I don't know, it's a heavy subject, and I just read a long, sprawling Holocaust novel last month. But again, I really very much appreciate this page. I don't have much to criticize about the actual quality of the page, so maybe this is a little bit of a cheat, but I definitely will ultimately be getting to this book. It is on my Goodreads TBR, so it'll make it to the top sooner or later. So that leaves the contest between these 2 books, Of Women in Salt and The Last Cruise. And funnily enough, I just talked about Of Women in Salt in my last video, which was also a TBR game, my quarterly BookTube spin, where I pick 20 books and have to read the one that the spinny thing lands on. And this was one of the books in one of my categories, and in fact, one of the spins I did actually landed on this book, except that it was a spin I did for my audience and not for myself. So basically I'm saying I don't already have plans to read this, so I will consider it now and say I was very intrigued by what was happening on the page, but it was a little confusing at first to get all the characters right, and I'm still not sure that I did. I think in the clip I was kind of guessing around that as well, but certainly there's some intriguing things in there about relationships between people and their staff that they hire for domestic help around the house, and maybe even relations between married people, and realities for perhaps children of poorer families or Latinx families. I mean, I'm kind of assuming more now, but it does interest me, but I do think it's the weaker of these 2, so I'm going to go with The Last Cruise. The Last Cruise had a really interesting, streamlined conversation between a manager and the person who reports to him. And I guess, admittedly enough, as you might have gotten from the clip, I have some bias. Being a manager myself, I sort of glomped in on some of the relationship stuff happening in here, and so it made it a little more interesting for me. But another thing that is going for this book, it has less to do with the specific contents of page 112, but it is a cruise ship book, and it does feel appropriate then for summertime. I mean, I know there are cruises all year round, but generally speaking, the ocean and the water and cruises tend to make most people think of summer. It's when most people take time off, when the weather's nicer, or their kids might be out from school. All I know is if I were on this cruise ship, I hopefully wouldn't be thinking like a manager at all, and I'd be in vacation mode, and I'm looking forward to getting to know these characters. And that about covers it for me now. You can find the Goodreads links for all 3 of the books I listed linked down below, as well as a link to my TBR game playlist where I have all of my other page 112 tag videos and BookTube spin videos. Another thing I like to do in this outro is highlight another booktuber who plays a TBR game. Feel like I'm paying forward the love a bit here. And this month I am highlighting TBR Land by Kaylee's Books, which is based off of the game Candyland, but she made a brand new board for it. But it's the same sort of deal where you pull a color card and have to go to that color on the board. It's just she has the different sections of her board siphoned off for different genres. So there's the color she pulls with a certain prompt on it, but she also has to make it fit the said genre of the category she's in. So I thought that was pretty cool. I thought it might be interesting to play a game that way. In fact, maybe it's even a little like the BookTube spin because I have 4 different categories that don't change. And it's also interesting how people, utilize Candyland in different ways. I think a few years ago I also highlighted another booktuber who played her version of Candyland for a TBR game, and people are just so creative and find different ways to, twist the rules for that. And anyway, I will link to Kaylee's videos down below. And with that, I am off. Just a final announcement to say I hope to be back in the next couple of days to do my first Am Reading video of July. Now that I've spent the last couple of videos adding books to my TBR, it's time to actually make good on my promise of reading and hopefully get some reading done and share with you my thoughts. So stay tuned for that. Thanks so much for watching, everyone, and I'll see you next time.